Good morning, everyone. Happy June, happy Monday, and welcome to today's webinar, Talking to Anxious Employees. So before we start, just some housekeeping items. If you do have any questions at all throughout the session, please go down to your chat button and put them right in there. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation, but if something pops into your head during the presentation, please add them into the chat. We ask that you please mute yourself during the presentation portion. And then once we get to the questions, you are more than welcome to turn your microphone on if you would rather speak directly to Nicole as opposed to putting it in the chat. But for now, please do that. And just to let everyone know, we are recording this session. If you have any coworkers or anyone you think would benefit, it will be available on YouTube by the end of the day. All right, so today's session, talking to anxious employees. As businesses are reopening, employees are coming back to work in the workplace. Many of them are feeling anxious. Like, will I be safe at work? Will my employer weather this storm? So on top of all the other new responsibilities that business owners and managers are facing, they must also manage anxious employees. How can business owners and managers talk to their employees about this anxiety? How can they prevent this anxiety from negatively impacting the workplace? So this presentation will help business owners and managers understand how anxiety is impacting their employees, understand the triggers causing employees anxiety, learn that listening is the key to talking, distinguish good and bad listening techniques, and prepare to manage employees' anxieties in the workplace. So we'll get started, and I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Nicole Smith. Thank you so much for being with us today, Nicole.
Thanks for having me, Tanya. So hopefully everyone can hear me. So my name is Nicole Smith, as Tanya said, and I'm the owner of Nicole Smith Conflict Management. I do consulting, come into businesses to help manage conflict that they're experiencing. So I do want to preface this by saying I have a very vocal cat who's not used to not being allowed to be on the table. So if you hear squawking in the background, I apologize. That is my cat. It's not a baby that's unmanaged. So we'll get started. So I think one of the things I want to say right off is, this is such an unprecedented experience we've all gone through. And we all know the saying that we want to, we never know what someone else is going through. So we have to treat everyone with compassion and tread lightly. And I think that's particularly important right now. All of the employees that you're going to be encountering in your workplace have experienced the lockdown, the pandemic, the state of emergency, have experienced it differently. So for some, it's possibly that it's been rejuvenating. That's given them a chance to reconnect with themselves, their kids, their family, their spouse. But for others, it's just as likely that it's been, exacerbating their mental health issues. It's caused relationship problems. It's led to them having shame and fear around money that they're spending right now or money that isn't coming in. So we want to tread lightly and have compassion for the employees who are coming in. And today we're going to talk about some of what they might be dealing with and how to address some of that so that it's not impacting your workplace as much as it possibly might. So I'm going to share my my screen with you guys now. So I want to start by talking about how anxiety might be impacting or is impacting your employees. So our fight, flight, or freeze process, our mechanism of fight, flight, or freeze, is an amazing mechanism that our bodies evolved to protect ourselves. The difficulty with it is that it can't distinguish, our bodies and our brains can't distinguish between what is fear of present imminent danger and what is anxiety over future possible danger. So the individuals that we have coming back into our workplaces are facing that same fight or flight response because of the anxiety over future possible danger that they might be experiencing if they were coming in and dealing with present danger. So what are some of the anxieties you think your employees are going to be dealing with right now? So if you want to unmute yourself and holler out your answer or put it in chat. Anybody have any ideas on what anxieties their employees might be coming into the workplace with? Well, what I'm wondering is if employees are coming in, oh, we have some chat answers. Let's look at the chat answers. Feeling safe, fear of infection. I think that is exactly it. I think that's the biggest contracting COVID-19. I think that fear over their safety is the biggest concern people have coming in, their safety need. So imagine you are an employee coming into your workplace for the first time in potentially 12 weeks, 3 whole months you've been home, and you are afraid of contracting COVID-19 yourself, or you are afraid of contracting it and taking it home to your family. So what happens in your body? So the first thing that happens is you get that sense of anxiety, and your body interprets it as danger, and it triggers the most animal part of your brain, the oldest part of your brain in the back. And that oldest part of your brain triggers your fight, flight, and freeze response. The first thing that it does is it tells your body to send most of your blood to your arms and legs in case you need to run or fight. So that means that most of your blood is in your extremities and less of your blood is in your core. So a lot of times we experience that response as a feeling in our stomach. We feel sick to our stomachs, or we have no appetite after we've had that stressful experience, that anxiety, because there's so little blood moving through and around our stomachs and our intestines that they've literally slowed down. What also happens is our body starts pumping us full of adrenaline. So there are times when you feel anxious or afraid that you literally feel like you're vibrating because your body has pumped you full of adrenaline to give you the ability to react. What also happens, and what's most detrimental, I think, is that we move from thinking with this part of our brain. We stop thinking with the reasonable part of our brain, the rational part of our brain, and we start thinking with the emotional part of our brains here along the sides. And that's why a lot of times when we come out of an experience of being in our fight, flight, or freeze response, we feel like we're coming out of a fog because we've been thinking with this more emotional part of our brain. The rational part of our brain isn't able to interpret or remember everything that's happened. So you're going to have employees coming into the workplace with this safety anxiety. They're going to be afraid of the potential future danger of getting COVID-19, and they're going to be not wanting to be there, which is them being in a flight response. They're going to be on edge, which is them being in a fight response, or they're going to feel numb, which is them being in a freeze response. So what do we do about this? How do we as employers, as business owners manage this? How do we understand it? So when I'm dealing with workplace conflict, one of the biggest things that I talk about are the things that trigger us in the workplace. And the triggers we experience most often in the workplace are a fear that our needs aren't going to be met, a fear that our values, our core values, aren't going to be respected, and a fear that our identity is going to be put in question. So the triggers that are most prevalent, or that I'm seeing most commonly around COVID-19, are our needs and our identity. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's lots of different ways of and sort of psychological tools to talk about human needs. This one's really concise, which is why I like using it. The first level of those needs are our physiological needs. That's air, food, water, shelter, those things that we need to keep us alive. The second level of those, once those are met, we get up to worrying about our safety needs. We need to feel secure. We need to feel out of danger. And the third level is love and belonging. That's what Maslow calls it, love and belonging. And really, that's the need for community. Those last two levels are esteem and self-actualization. And a lot of times when we're talking about our needs being triggered in the workplace, we are talking about that need for esteem or the need for self-actualization. But around COVID-19, I think we're really looking at a fear that our physiological needs, our safety needs, and our community needs aren't being met or aren't going to be met. So when we look at what physiological needs we have as people, air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, all of this right now in our day and age is around money. Most of the time, if you have an employee who's worried about being fired, who's worried about their salary, who's worried about money, they're being triggered because they're afraid their physiological need isn't going to be met. They aren't going to be able to provide for themselves, provide for their families. So physiological needs are going to be impacting your employees heavily coming into this. whether they're hourly waged and they've been off because you've been closed, or whether they're salaried but you've had to lay them off. Even if they've been receiving the benefit, the CERB, even if you've been continuing to pay them, they may still be triggered right now around money. People have a lot of fear right now about whether the economy is going to bounce back. All of this happened so quickly. Everything had to shut down so quickly that people don't know what it's going to look like when we turn the page and we're on the other side. So people have a lot of physiological triggers, a lot of fear happening around money over the overall economy. Are we going to be able to afford fresh vegetables in the summer? Are we going to be able to pay off the debt that we accumulated over the stay-at-home lockdown? And on top of that, is my employer going to weather this storm? Is my employer going to be, I have a job today, but am I going to have a job in August? Am I going to be able to continue affording and living the life that I have been living in an economy that's in such a precarious position? So even though coming back to work, people may be slightly less triggered by this right now because they are suddenly getting paid again, there's still a lot of anxiety that's really built into people's fear that their physiological need for money and thus the elements of living are not going to be met. There's also a real fear right now, obviously, around safety needs, as you said at the beginning. So what safety needs, what questions are occupying your employees right now? If you guys want to put them in chat. Yeah, worried of putting a spouse who's high risk and danger. That is absolutely a fear. I have a close friend who had a baby at the beginning of May, and I still haven't met the baby because I'm very worried, even though we're allowed to see close friends and family right now, I'm very worried about giving the baby COVID. What if I'm asymptomatic and I pass it over? What's being done to protect me? I imagine you're hearing a lot of that from your employees right now. Are my coworkers taking precautions seriously? Everybody's handling this differently. Everybody's reacting to this differently. Some people still don't take it as seriously as they ought to. That's absolutely a fear. So one thing that is going to be tough for you as managers is that no matter how much effort and how much work you're putting into protecting your employees, they're still going to worry. They're still going to have that anxiety because their safety need is triggered. Will there be enough PPE for me to have face masks and hand sanitizer at work? Am I going to be able to stay an appropriate and safe distance from my customers, from my coworkers? Are we going to have time to wash our hands in between each interaction, or after touching money, or after, touching the counter? It's a really visceral fear for people right now, and they're having an anxiety over it that's causing them to go into fight or flight. And then the final need of the three that I think is really impacting people right now is that need for community. That's what Maslow calls the love and belonging level of the hierarchy of needs. People have been self-isolating for up to possibly 12 weeks. And that's a long time. And so people have been potentially self-isolating alone, those of us who live alone. People maybe have been self-isolating with roommates or with family, but don't have healthy or safe relationships in that environment. People maybe weren't able to get their first choice as bubble family. I think one of the biggest conversations people were having when we went into the orange level and people started having bubble families was that, who do you pick? Is this like the playground? Who gets picked by who? Who's the cool kid? Not everyone got their first choice. And because of that, there's a lot of fear that that need for friendship and intimacy, family and connection isn't going to be met. I think that people are going to feel a bit of relief around this trigger coming back into the workplace. A lot of people have established their relationship and their community around their work. So I think a lot of people will feel a bit of a relief around this. But on top of that relief, there's still going to be the fear that these restrictions are going to be put back in place. So we might be allowed to be in the workplace today, but next week, am I going to be allowed to be in the workplace? Especially with what's happening in Campbellton, I think a lot of people in New Brunswick are very nervous that the ease of restrictions we've experienced is going to be rolled back. And so there's going to be a real trigger around, am I going to be able to have the community supports I need, the community connection I need, if all of the things that we experience right now are going to get rolled back. So the final trigger that I want to talk about, and I promise the presentation's not all doom and gloom, but the final trigger I want to talk about before we go into sort of steps to manage this is identity. So I love this picture. I love that it says productivity on it, because I think there's a strange intensity and sort of kind of, you know, sort of intense need in our culture to prove we're being productive. One thing, when I'm dealing with workplace conflict, one thing identity really comes into is, you know, if you feel like your boss's critique of your work is actually saying you're not a good employee, or if you feel like your coworkers' complaint about your behavior is saying you're not a good person. We have these depths of identity that we hold on to that when they're rocked, when they're questioned, really trigger us. The thing I think that's happening right now during COVID is I think a lot of people are discovering that a big part of their identity is grounded in their work. A lot of people who've had to stay home, who've had to work from home, who've had to be off work entirely so they don't have anything to do, have started to discover that they really ground their identity in what they do for a living. And as a result, have experienced the state of emergency with listlessness, with a sense of disquiet, not knowing what's happening to them, but feeling that sense of unmotivation. So even people who aren't able to articulate, my identity is shaken by being home and not working, are still feeling that. So again, this is one of those things that I think may be relieved a little bit by people coming back into the workplace. They're going to feel a relief of that trigger a little bit. But the anxiety of that trigger being shook again is going to be, will I be in the workplace next week? I can be in the workplace and do my job today, but will we have to self-isolate again in a week? So I think that there's a real importance to knowing that this has impacted people, knowing this is a trigger for people, and knowing that even when these triggers are relieved a little bit by being back in the workplace, people's anxieties, it's going to be that their trigger is going to be reignited by being sent home again. So what do we do? You know, our employees are coming into the workplace and they're feeling a real trigger over money because we've all been home and the world's in a strange lockdown and everyone's worried about the economy and they're worried about their own income. People are feeling triggered about their safety needs, aggressively triggered because we don't know enough about this virus. You know, we think the restrictions we have in place are safe and are sufficient, and we trust our public safety, you know, Dr. Russell, we trust the government, we trust public safety, but people nonetheless are afraid they're going to get it. They're afraid they're going to take it home. They're afraid that the provisions in place aren't enough. People are feeling triggered because they've been stuck at home. Their need for community has been really, really curtailed. And then on top of that, people are feeling a real sense of struggle around their identity. So how do we manage that as people are coming back into our workplaces? Well, I want to pause on this and say, you are not a counselor. None of us, unless there's somebody on this call who is a counselor, who manages other counselors, none of us on this call are psychologists. None of us on this call are psychiatrists. We're not counselors. You are not going to be able to completely resolve these anxieties for your employees. And you can't put that expectation on yourself. But what you can do is, as a manager, as a boss, as a supervisor, as a business owner, what you can do and what you should prepare yourself to do is to listen and to reassure them as best you can. So yes, unfortunately, what I'm saying is that on top of the 101 other new responsibilities that you have as a business owner and a manager, you also now need to prepare yourself to spend more time talking to and listening to your staff than maybe you ever have, because they need that reassurance right now in order to mitigate the anxiety they're bringing into the workplace. And for you to do that, you're doing it obviously because it's the good thing to do, but primarily because it's going to mitigate the impact of that anxiety on your workplace. So I want to talk to you right now about listening. Listening is the most amazing communication skill. It is the magic wand to all conflict management. And it is what's going to save you right now. What's going to help you manage the anxiety of your employees. So there are bad listening habits we need to try to avoid. We all do them from time to time. None of us are innocent of this. Even I do these things. But it's important to recognize them in ourselves and try to stop them. So the first bad listening habit is listening to respond. We often do this. We are not actually hearing what the other person is saying. We are waiting for them to stop talking so that we can talk. We're thinking about what we want to say next. So that's not really being present or listening. That's listening so that you can say something. The second bad habit is getting triggered. We just talked about all the ways that your employees are probably triggered right now, but you are probably experiencing all those same triggers. On top of that, you're experiencing the trigger of, am I a good boss? Am I doing enough to protect these people? You have a lot of your own triggers going on, so you are going to have to try and manage your own reaction to those triggers when they're coming to you and needing you to hear them, needing you to listen to them. One of the bad listening habits we do is we ask unnecessary questions. People don't necessarily want us to ask them questions. They want us to let them say their piece. We dismiss their feelings. We often say, oh, well, I wouldn't worry about it. But that's not going to help that person put those feelings away. That just makes them feel shut down. We use humor to deflect the conversation. I would say that's a great skill. Farther down the conversation, I would say that the first thing you need to do is listen and hold those sort of joking comments to yourself so that the person can feel heard first. We're distracted. As I said, you have 101 different things you have to be doing right now. And so it's going to be hard to take the time to hear and listen to someone. So we're going to talk in a minute about what you can say when someone comes to you and you're in the middle of something and they want to talk. We jump to policy and process. So oftentimes if someone comes to us and wants to talk about what's going on or how they're feeling, we say, well, here's the things the government said I had to put in place. Here's the rules around the space between the tables. Here's what I've done to meet those needs. That's an important thing to do, but you need to do that after you've listened to them. So if you say, yeah, I know you're worried, but don't worry, I followed this rule and this rule and this rule, they're not going to feel reassured yet. And the worst thing that we do, and we all do it, we absolutely all do it, is we offer solutions too quickly. We want to solve the problem for them. We want to take care of our employees. We want to resolve the situation efficiently and quickly. So we say, well, okay, I will only put you on shift with Andrea because I know Andrea is also nervous. So the two of you will both be cautious. Well, solving it too quickly hasn't given them the opportunity to be heard yet. So when I talk about listening, I really do mean it's the opportunity for you to hear what they're saying to you. So what are good listening habits? Paying attention, really, really listening to what they're saying, not thinking about what you want to say next, not thinking about the 3 things you have to do next, but really focusing on them. Managing your own triggers, knowing that you are going to be particularly upset when Mark comes to complain because he's always a complainer and he's going to complain about this, knowing you have a trigger about that and preparing yourself to keep a hold of yourself in that moment. Show you're listening. It's strange to watch myself give training and to see all of the movements that I do, but I know that there is a lot of movements we do when we show listening that are small and subtle, but incredibly impactful for the other person. So leaning in, eye contact, nodding your head, actually visibly showing you're listening. I just see we have a couple of comments in chat, so I'm just going to have a look at them. Oh, she nailed it, Mark. Sorry. That's what happens when I pick common names, eh? The biggest and most important good listening habit is acknowledging feelings. Feelings are scary to people. Usually when I give training, I call feelings the F word because I know it's scary for people. But acknowledging feelings is the best way to get that person over sort of the emotional hump of the conversation. And we're going to talk about a couple of really easy phrases to use to do that in a minute. Ask open questions. How can I help you? What would make you feel safer? Not, well, is this enough? Yes or no. Does that help? Yes or no. Yes or no questions aren't going to help them feel like you're really engaging in a conversation. Open-ended questions will. And only after you've done the other things, only after you've actually listened, then provide solutions. I always think of it as when someone comes into a session with me, whether we're doing coaching or whether I'm helping someone prepare for a mediation, their feelings are up here. And they need me to help them by these listening skills, bring their feelings down here, so that by the time we're down here, they can actually hear the solution I'm telling them, or they can hear the advice I'm giving, or they can answer a question about what's going to help. When someone's up here, they're not ready for that. So we use listening to bring them down to a place where then they can actually hear the solution we're giving them. So I said I have a few useful phrases for you. I do. So the useful phrases are very simple. And the reason I give them out is because they're the ones I use the most often. So the first the first three essentially are acknowledging feelings. I know this is scary. I know this is overwhelming. I know this is a lot. That sounds like it is tough. That sounds like it was hard. The reason that those are such simple phrases is because often we worry that we have to say the exact right thing to someone who's very emotional, whether they're crying, whether they're obviously anxious and worked up, whether they're expressing some really deep feelings. And what I've discovered in my work is that saying, that sounds like it was really tough, is just as impactful as finding the exact right word to articulate the feeling they're bringing to you. So people are going to hear, that sounds like it's hard, as you understanding and acknowledging their feelings. So that second bullet, that's golden. That's a golden thing to use to help your employees understand that you are hearing them and you're hearing their feelings and you're trying to reflect their feelings and tell them that you understand. Same with, I know this is scary. I know this is overwhelming. I know this is a lot. Because it's true and because it's simple, people are going to feel heard. Come talk to me anytime you feel nervous, anxious, uncertain. Feeling like they have a space to come address their concern is going to let people feel reassured. So we talked about listening and also now reassurance. People are going to feel reassured. What can I do to help? What can I do to make you feel safer? Now, you're going to ask that question and they might request the moon from you, and you know you can't give them the moon. That doesn't mean that you have to meet all the needs they're suggesting, or meet all the changes. But you can say, well, let me look into what I can do. Or, you know what, I can definitely do that first thing you suggested right now, and we'll see about the other two as we go forward. So giving them that space to show that you want to help them feel safer. Now, the final bullet is the bullet for what do you say when someone comes to you to try and talk to you about their feelings and you're in the middle of something else. I mean, as I've said throughout this whole thing, you have a million new things to try and deal with. You are trying to manage your own safety, the safety of your family, keeping your business alive, keeping your livelihood in place, keeping the New Brunswick economy going. I mean, you have a lot on your shoulders. And people are going to come to you and try and talk to you about their feelings, and you're going to be in the middle of something else. So all you have to say is, you know what, I'm in the middle of something right now, but I'm so glad you came to talk to me. Can we pick this up at 2 p.m.? Or can I come find you in 15 minutes? Telling them you appreciate them coming, telling them that you want to continue the conversation, but that right now just isn't a good time to do that, shows them that you care, reassures them that you want to hear them, and also shows that you want to take the proper time to hear them. And it gives you that little bit of space to finish what you're doing before you go engage in that conversation. That one I would say is going to be really useful to you, hopefully, because it's going to be something you're probably going to need to do a lot. Say, look, I'm in the middle of something, helping a customer, I'm doing this order for new supplies, but let's talk in 20 minutes. Thank you for coming to me. So those are useful phrases. I am happy to send the presentation out if you didn't want to take a picture of the screen or if you haven't written those down. But I think they're going to be important because they're going to help you quickly and easily mitigate helping people feel heard and reassured. And I want to talk about knowing that we're going to get into a position where all of this feels routine. So one thing that we know from talking to essential workers, people who've worked in the post office, people who work in pharmacies, people who work in healthcare, who've had to keep working through all of this lockdown, this state of emergency, they eventually get to a point where all the extra cleaning, all the extra sanitation, all the extra equipment they have to wear starts to feel routine. Doesn't mean it's okay, it doesn't mean they're happy about it, but they get to a point where they're not as anxious because it's a routine. And the human brain loves routine. And so it helps them reduce that sense of anxiety. So what I want you to remember as you step into your workplace with anxious employees, and as you know you're going to have or take this extra time to listen to them and to reassure them, and are maybe dreading that extra time you need, that it's not going to be a constant. After a few weeks, of these measures being in place, after a few weeks of no one in your workplace getting sick, then people are going to start to feel very routine with the new behaviors they have to do, and their anxiety levels are going to reduce. Now, every time we make a change, people are going to go straight back to that place of high anxiety. Unfortunately, that's the situation we're in. So if, because of what's going on in Campbellton, the whole province has to move from yellow back to orange, people are going to go straight back to that place, straight back to zero with their anxiety. But that does mean for you as a business owner, as a manager, as a supervisor, that your that high need to listen to and reassure your employees during those periods of anxiety is going to ebb and flow. It's not going to be constant. You're going to need to really be there for them in those moments of high anxiety. And then as new procedures become routine, as things stay stagnant and people develop a sense of routine, it's going to ebb. So I want you to think about that, because what I am essentially asking you to do today is prepare yourself for that extra amount of time you're going to need to talk to, listen to, reassure your employees. And that's going to be frustrating for some of you. That's going to be dreadful for some of you. But I find that if we prepare ourselves for those necessities, if we know going in, next week my staff come back and I'm going to have to take 20% of my day to listen to them talk about their feelings, we might not love it, but we're more capable of doing it. So the final thing I want to say, and I'm kidding us, hopefully we'll be done by 10:40, so we have lots of time for questions. Final thing I want to say is, as I said at the beginning, we are not counselors. You are not a counselor. You as a business owner have a lot on your shoulders, but completely resolving the anxieties of your employees is not one of them. So right now is a really good time to make our employees aware of the mental health services, mental health resources available to them through their employment. So if you have access to an EAP or an EFAP program for your staff, that's Employee Assistance Program or Employee and Family Assistance Program, which at its core was originally counseling, has a variety of kinds of counseling now, but has mental health counseling. Make sure they know about it. Even if you sound like a broken record, make sure they know about it. If you have an insurance, health insurance plan at your employer, with your business that allows them to have reduced costs for mental health services, make sure they know that. And as a lot of small businesses do, if you can't afford right now or haven't been able to put in place mental health services, health insurance services for your staff, there are still provincial resources. Let them know about the CHIMO helpline. Let them know about Canadian Mental Health Association New Brunswick's live webinars that they've been doing since the beginning of the state of emergency and continue to do regularly. Let them know about the numbers to access the Fredericton Addictions and Mental Health Services line or the Capital Region Mental Health and Addictions Services. Because we are not able to ever address the full breadth of what's going on with someone inside their own head, your role is to try and mitigate the impact of that anxiety on your staff and your workplace. But the professionals are there for the next steps. And so letting your staff know about these resources is an important thing right now. And so finally, What I say is, if at any point you think, you know what, I kind of want to talk about my own triggers right now and how to manage those before I go into work with my staff. I want to talk about a particular issue I'm having with a particular staff person. I want to talk a bit more about how to mitigate those anxieties. Feel free to give me a call. I think we're all in this together, and I think it's important right now that we support each other. So please feel free to reach out to me and talk about what anxieties you're going through with your staff, what anxieties you see coming in, and how to mitigate those. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. All right, we're going to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can turn on your microphone and your video and ask them that way. Whichever way you feel comfortable doing that, please do so. And as we wait for that, I just want to say thank you, Nicole. Those were some really great tips and tricks that you gave us, and I very much agree with so much of what you said.
Oh, wonderful. And I think the important thing to remember as we're all getting into the workplace again, as our employees are coming back into the workplace again, is that, you might have a question right now that you don't want to ask because we're recording or because it's a crowd. You're always welcome to give me a call. I'm always happy to talk this stuff through. And these things are maybe things you want to ponder. Maybe some of the triggers I've mentioned are things that you're dealing with yourself, and suddenly you've recognized them and you want to think them over a little bit. So I'm happy to share the presentation. I know most of my presentations are primarily pictures. So I tried to include some more sort of words and at least bullet points so that you guys could have them if you need them. And maybe it's just a matter of you saying, yeah, that phrase is one I'm going to use a lot in the workplace, and take that away.
Mm-hmm. I think this is great. If no one has any questions, then we can wrap up for the morning. Thank you so much, Nicole. I know we at the Chamber have worked with you on a few things, and it's always great. You always have really good advice for our members. So thank you so much. And we ask all of our members to please check out the event section of our website. We have lots of really good webinars coming up. Some that we've partnered with the other chambers in the province for as well. Yeah, we've got a comment here. Excellent presentation. Thanks, Nicole and the Fredericton Chamber. So yes, thank you everybody for joining us. Have a great rest of your day and a good week. All right, thank you.
Thanks for having this. Thanks for hosting.